There we are.
It says we are live.
Yay.
And we promised that we would start at 5 o'clock. So it is now 5. Okay, so welcome everyone. And thank you for Sadie for joining the Amherst Pelham Regional Schools and the Fort River community today. We are having 4 community forums and you are the first of 4. So staff and caregivers were given an opportunity to submit questions that they would like you to answer. So in addition to the questions that were submitted, I also went back to the interview questions and added a couple from there. So we have a total of about 14 questions. You will have an hour and 30 minutes to answer those 14 questions. And if any questions coming through the live or the chat feature, then you'll also have an opportunity, if we still have time, to answer some of those questions too. So Sadie, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm so excited and really looking forward to it.
Okay, great. So as you know, we had changed our whole process on how we do our hiring, and only the screening committee had an opportunity to review your resume. And the screening committee did not know your name because your name was removed from it. So this is an opportunity now for everything to come together and people to get to see, oh, this is that person who you're going to tell us about yourself in a second, but they'll get the chance to say, oh, this is that person who we looked at her resume and said, yes, let's move her forward to the forum or to the interview. And then the interview group now moved you forward to the forums. So as usual, question number 1 is going to ask you to please tell us about yourself, what roles, responsibilities, or experiences and licenses you may hold that helped you prepare to be the next principal of Fort River Elementary.
Great. Thank you so much. So first of all, I just want to say how excited I am to have been invited to continue to get to know the community. Estoy tan agradecida que me han invitado a seguir con el proceso y de seguir conociendo lo que está buscando la comunidad de Fort River and su siguiente líder. So I'm so excited to have the opportunity to continue in this process and keep on learning what Fort River is looking for in its next leader. I've really loved Fort River ever since I had the opportunity to be an intern with Mrs. Griswold when I was completing my master's degree in elementary education. And then that same year, I continued working at Fort River as a sub in the Ames program and throughout the building and in building blocks, and then continued the year after I finished my program as a long-term sub teaching Spanish and ESL. So that when the opportunity came up to apply to return to Fort River, it really felt like an opportunity that I was really excited about returning or considering returning to this community. In terms of like more formally resume, parts of my resume, I've been teaching in Northampton at Jackson Street Elementary School for the past 8 years. I've taught 3rd grade and 4th grade. I've had various formal and informal leadership roles. I served as a grade level literacy coach while teaching full time. I was on various committees and really got really interested in how we can work together as a learning community to transform school so that it is a place that's affirming and welcoming and that really works for all of our students and all of our families. Prior to working at Jackson Street, I spent a year finishing my master's and spent, probably about half of that year at Fort River. Before that, I taught Spanish in Holyoke to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students for 2 years. And then before that, and this I don't include it in an education resume, but I worked in the legal field for a couple years. So that sort of gave me like a big picture view of things, and I really decided that I wanted to be an educator. And so, just a little bit of what I believe. I believe that schools need to be welcoming and affirming and inclusive spaces, that we need to work together as a team collaboratively, to partner with families, and make sure that we're responding to their needs, and that we're really working together to develop a shared vision for what we want our school to be like. And then the process of implementing that vision is one that I see as a multi-year plan, again, working in collaboration. I see the role of the school leader as fostering that collaboration, communicating with stakeholders, advocating for equity within the school. And I recently read this quote that made me really think about Fort River, because, I've obviously been thinking about it and had a conversation with the interview committee, and it said, the quote was, "Justice is what love looks like in public." And so I was thinking about, what does it mean for me to choose love? And for me, a big part of what it means to choose love, love for my students, love for my community, is to advocate for justice and stand up against racism and not shy away from having conversations that feel uncomfortable, but are so necessary for all of us to grow. On a personal level, I've lived in this area almost my whole life. I've had some opportunities to travel outside of the area, but I feel like I have really strong roots. I'm really excited. I feel like I'm looking for a learning community to have the rest of my career in. And at Jackson Street, I had a principal who has retired, but who was the principal for 24 years. And I saw the impact that kind of real long-term leadership had on the learning community and on the ability of the school to kind of carve out its identity and be a really safe space for growing and for everyone to grow, right? For educators to grow, for students to grow. And that's what I'm really hoping to do if I'm selected at Fort River. So other than that, I'm just really looking forward to hearing what the questions are that came from the community. I think it's really an opportunity for me to understand what Fort River is looking for, because this process is about finding a match, right? For me to find a match, and for Amherst and Fort River to find a match. And so I feel like I'm a good fit. I feel like my leadership style, I feel like my experience as an educator in the Valley, I feel like my philosophy of education is a really, really good match. And so I hope that after this evening, all of you will feel that way as well.
Well, thank you for that. You talked about your leadership style, and it leads right into question number 2, which says, how will your leadership style influence teacher instruction?
So first of all, I will say that my leadership style leans toward collaboration. I'm not a go it alone kind of leader. I was the union president in my current district, and I feel like that I really gained skill at facilitating conversations with groups of adults, making sure we're moving forward, making sure that we're sort of focused on what our goal for gathering, our goal for a conversation is. But I never felt like direction or decision making was for me to make alone. I really saw it as a collective project, and I feel the same way about school leadership. And so because I believe in collaboration, and because I don't believe in positioning myself as an expert all the time who's going to, come in like my way is always the best way, I approach relationships with other educators with curiosity, and with a really deep belief in the strengths of my colleagues. And so I want to see what people are doing that's amazing, so that we can share and so that we can all be lifted up by things that are going really, really well. So I think that my approach towards improving instruction is much more of a professional learning community approach, much more of an approach where we're all working together. I am such a strong believer in peer coaching. I think that if somebody has, something that they want me to give them feedback on, I'm glad to give feedback. But I think the ways that I've always grown the most as an educator was when I got to go and watch a colleague that I really care about and really respect, and watch their practice and learn from their practice, and have opportunities to do that really frequently. And so I love conversations about teaching practice. I love finding ways to have an approach that's driven by evidence and data, that's not just, looking at summative data, looking at assessment data when the cycle of teaching has ended. And so I feel like I'm going to probably say collaboration a lot this evening, but it's really, really true. That is what I believe in, because I believe that together we can all lift each other up, and together we can all work towards our goals, which is really the goal of having a school that really works and that responds to every student's needs and that allows every student to be their best.
Okay. Thank you for that. The third question says, knowing that that there is a pandemic and students and staff are just returning to in-person instruction, what is your vision for a fully thriving school committed to equity, social justice, and the emotional well-being of students and staff?
I think I'm just writing that down so that I don't forget part of it. So I think that my vision is that we, as we contemplate returning and more students returning in person to the buildings this spring, and I see, next fall as being part of a process of returning. And I think, first of all, we have to think there's a lot of sort of deficit thinking happening about what our students have lost or what they've missed. And so I really hope that we can start our conversations about what we need to do to respond to the pandemic, really focusing on the amazing resilience that our students and that educators have displayed, and the ways that people have redesigned their teaching and really rethought a lot of things to respond to the learning context of the pandemic. And it's really my hope that this return and starting as a new leader in the building will be an opportunity for us to really reflect on, what have we done in the past that's really, really worked? What did we do during the pandemic that really worked? What were the things that happened that maybe unexpectedly worked really well for some students, and maybe worked really well for some educators that maybe they wouldn't have thought of? Like an example, I started using Google Classroom, and I was sort of a reluctant adopter of that. I was like, no, I don't need that. And then I started using it, and I realized the ways that it actually helped my students, and got their feedback on it. And they said, no, we want you to keep doing these things. So the ways that we partner with families, knowing that there has to be this give and take in communication constantly in a way that was really different when kids were learning at home. And so I think that there are a lot of lessons that can come out of some of the shifts that we made during the pandemic. But I think the most important thing that we need to focus on is the community of the school, and the ways that every student has a place in the community, and every student is honored and valued in our school community, whether they're physically in the building or whether they're learning virtually. And that we need to develop our school improvement plan, our annual school improvement plan, reflecting on what are the things that we want to reimagine. What are things that we want to do differently from how we've ever done them, and what are things that we really feel need to be continued, and all of that with a focus on students and educators and community well-being, and that sense of belonging that really creates the conditions for learning.
Okay. Thank you for that. We're now at question number 4. And this one should seem a bit familiar to you. It was one asked during the interview. And it says, at Fort River, we consider all groups to be critical stakeholders in our school. How would you work effectively with a diverse group of families or caregivers who may have values that differ from yours? How would you get input from groups that have not felt included in school decisions in the past?
I love this question. I'm so glad that you asked it again, because I think it's a really, really important thing for us to talk about and think about. I think that one of the things that I love about living and working in this area is that there are so many different kinds of people, and so many different perspectives. And so my approach is really always about inviting as many perspectives, inviting people who maybe have a different opinion, or people who see things a different way, to share their vision and to share where they're coming from so that we can consider them as we plan. I have a lot of experience working with a very, very diverse group of families and caregivers, similar and different from the Fort River community. And part of what I've learned is that, there are always going to be people who are excited to share how they feel and what they think. And that is wonderful, and I welcome that. And then there are some people who, as you mentioned, maybe have not felt included in the past. And it's really important to me that I'm proactive and that we are proactive in reaching out and hearing from people. And if that means that, we have to have conversations with folks who don't feel like we've done the best job from their view, even though we were doing our best, then we have to be able to have those conversations. And so for me, I really choose to approach challenging conversations with empathy, and combat any defensiveness that I might feel, knowing that all of us do our best, but knowing that sometimes, we need to hear from somebody who maybe our best didn't work for, and that's not, that's nothing personal. It's just part of what happens when we have such a diverse community, and there has to be space for the compliments and questions and as well, and concerns as well. I was trying to bring up Mrs. Griswold had an awesome phrase, and it was like halfway to me, but it didn't come, that she would end her class newsletter with. And so just like an example of how I've done that in the past, last year we started before the buildings closed, and sort of continued. I convened a focus group of all different stakeholders. It was educators, it was caregivers, representatives of community groups, and we really reviewed the school's communication structures. And we did a survey of families that we pushed out in all different ways to try to get lots of different responses to kind of find out, like, who's getting information from the school, who is informed, because I really feel like having the information really allows families and caregivers to be involved in their students' education. And so if we have gaps in who we're reaching, and we have, groups of families who can't access communication because it's not being translated to a language that they speak, or it's being sent to an email address that doesn't work, or whatever it was. And so we really evaluated the communication structures that we were using in the school, and then brought it back to the full team of educators to sort of come up with a plan for how we could communicate more inclusively. And the result of that was that we made a decision across the whole school to use some technology to help us translate communications, and to have two-way translation between caregivers and educators. And I saw, in my own group of students that I was working with, how I was able to communicate with families that I had felt disconnected from before. Another one was like, we weren't really using text messaging. And we heard from caregivers, like, we really need to be able to communicate with the school through text message. That's the way, that's our preferred method, and we would much rather send a text. And so we got text capabilities so that we could text with families. And that is another thing that made a big difference. So I think I really work to be proactive, I really work to make sure that I'm reaching everyone, and I really make sure that I'm really, really open to feedback, and that feedback could be positive, it could be compliments, or it could be somebody saying, that really didn't work for me, and that I can hear both of those things and learn from both of them.
Okay. So you talked about being open to feedback, and it kind of leads us into the next question. And the next question says,
good job with this.
The next question says, tell us about a time when you had to make a decision that you knew would be unpopular. What steps did you take prior to making this decision, and how did you handle the pushback, if there was any?
Definitely been in that situation. And I try to, I think when you make a decision like that, you kind of know, okay, I understand the reason why I have to make this decision. Maybe it's a policy constraint. Maybe it's a legal constraint. Maybe it's, I have information that I have to keep confidential and I can't share with someone. Like, whatever the reason is, there are lots of reasons. And the way that I have approached it, I think pretty much every time that I've encountered that situation is being really open and really transparent. If I'm making a decision and I know somebody is going to be upset or frustrated about it, having a conversation with that person and saying, I understand that this is frustrating. Let's problem solve together. Let's figure out something that works. And then knowing that after the decision is made, that people who are upset are going to need to be heard. And that's something that I learned from my mentor, Gwen Agna, who was the principal at Jackson Street, is that we have to be able to listen to people, and we have to be able to give people space to talk about the thing that they're upset about. And sometimes the space is just venting. And so I approach that as, I'll say, I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to listen to you, and not try to insert problem solving if the person doesn't want that. And I find that just listening and having empathy and recognizing, that someone is upset, and I can say, I can tell you're upset about that, and I understand, that can diffuse some of the frustrations. I think that a lot of times that kind of a decision, a decision that you're going to get pushback on, there's often history behind the situation. And so understanding that history and understanding kind of the roots of the frustration has really helped me be able to be supportive of someone, and know that sometimes as a leader, you are constrained in your ability to respond to one individual's situation, although we can always be supportive, right? But maybe I'm not going to be able to change the decision, but I always am going to be able to make space and have empathy for someone who's upset, and explain as much as I can and be as transparent as possible. And not in a way that dismisses their feelings or their concerns.
Okay.
And then I want to add one thing, because I'm still thinking about it. And then also recognizing that often when there's history, and if someone is feeling left out, or if someone is feeling frustrated about the outcome, that I can figure out a way to invite that person in. So say, oh, I know that you really cared about XYZ issue. Will you join a committee that's working on something related, or, find a way for that person or that group of people to have some productive involvement in the future.
Okay. So you can always stop me to add whatever you feel you need to add, because we are 24 minutes in and we're at question number 6 out of 14.
I'm hoping we're going to get some live questions also.
Let's hope so. If not, we're still okay.
Yeah, we can talk about education. We can do that for a long, long time.
Okay, so question number 6. What is your ideal discipline policy, and how would you develop such a policy?
discipline. So I strongly believe that students' behavior is communication with the adults. I strongly believe that all students are doing the best they can. I believe that about adults also. Like really deeply in my heart, believe that everybody's doing the best they can. And so when you're asking about discipline, I think you're asking about what do we do when a student's behavior doesn't match our expectations, or what do we do when a student's behavior doesn't meet sort of the norms of the community. And so my first response to that student is, what is that behavior? What's the behavior trying to communicate? Is there a support that needs to be put in place? Do we need to have some proactive planning for that student? Do we need to bring our team together so that we can say, oh, we're noticing a pattern? Do we need to collect some data on it? So I'm always trying to learn from a behavior that a student is exhibiting. And if a student is calm enough and regulated enough, involve that student in a conversation to help us understand their behavior. Because I have found that when I go to a student and say, like, hey, what's going on? You seemed really upset, that they'll say, well, this and this and this happened, and I really didn't like it, and it made me feel upset. And then we can plan around that. I believe that we need to have a restorative focus to our discipline. I think that is probably rooted in my experience being raised by a responsive classroom as a student at the center school. That consequences need to focus on what's logical, what's related to what's going on, and they need to be focused on repairing any harm that has been done by behavior. I think that in terms of like a school level discipline policy, like responding to specific behaviors, I think obviously am guided by the district's policies and the code of conduct that does spell out the responses to certain kinds of behavior. But I think that my approach is always about understanding the behavior, protecting that student, protecting their peers so that learning continues, getting a student, if we're talking about explosive behavior, which I have experience with, we're talking about helping a student re-regulate so that they can return to their classroom and to the learning community as soon as it's safe for them to return. And then making sure that we're getting our team together and really understanding why are we seeing a behavior so that we can make sure that we're planning to prevent it in the future for that student and for their peers and for all of the learning community.
Okay. So it seems like you have an idea of what I'm going to be asking, because you talked about restorative practices, and the next question leads right into that. It says, question number 7, can you give a specific example of action steps you have taken to implement restorative practices in your prior roles?
Yeah, definitely. So I have thought a lot about and reflected a lot, and I read all the time, and I try to read new research, and I try to read theory about education and keep on learning and growing. And I did a lot of thinking over the last couple years of my relationship with my students and my role as an authority figure. Oh, I'm sorry, I just missed something. I was trying to listen. And so I've really learned to move away from dynamics with students that are like power struggles or dynamics that are about control, and think about what are the norms of our community. In my class, we call them agreements that we build together, and And I shared in the interview with the committee that when we returned from remote learning, my students added a fourth agreement, which was stand up for justice. And so we, safety and respect, trying our best, and standing up for justice. So specific examples are advocating for students to be able to make appropriate repairs when something has happened. I had a student who would get really, really upset and tear up books. And so an appropriate repair that restored and tried to address the harm that had been caused by that was putting the books back together and doing that together, because that allows me to rebuild that rapport with the student. Another example when it comes to discipline is thinking more on a structural level. So if there is an interaction that's happening and it's the result of a policy or it's the result of a rule that we have, I do think that if people are struggling with that rule or that policy, that we need to evaluate it and make sure that it makes sense and that it's not something that's carried over from the past and isn't currently serving an educational goal. An example of that was our no hats rule that we had. And after some interactions with a student of mine that were really challenging for both of us, my students decided to use their class opinion writing piece to write a persuasive letter about why kids should be allowed to wear hats if they wanted to. And so I took that letter that my students had written and joined the Code of Conduct Task Force that was rewriting our district Code of Conduct and brought what I learned from them to get a policy that wasn't working for them changed. And so I think it's the thinking on an individual level, how do we focus on if there is harm done to the community or to an individual, focusing on how we can support students in repairing it in a way that's appropriate, in a way that they're able to, but then also looking at sort of a broader community and systems level. How do we make sure that the rules and the policies that we have in place are designed also to support students and are focused on our goals for our community and focused on supporting learning and not just about controlling people.
Okay. So that was question number 7. And I'm going to give you an opportunity if you'd like to get a sip of water or something, because I know you've been talking for about a half an hour.
I try. It's kind of funny. I could be like very, very long-winded and talk probably for an hour about each of these questions. So I try to like temper myself, but maybe I'll let myself be more long-winded.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we are halfway through the questions that are on my document here. And we still have an hour. So question number 8 says, how ready and equipped are you to address issues of racial justice? Please provide examples of how you engage with this type of work. And while you're answering, I'm going to get my water bottle.
Yes, you get your water. I really appreciate this question. I think that being prepared to address issues of racial justice when they come up in schools is really, really important. And it's not just important because of the specific time that we're living in right now. It's important all the time because we know that systemic racism exists in all of our institutions. We know that we're all, it's the air that we breathe. And so we have to be really conscious and really intentional about addressing it and having conversations and building stamina for conversations that maybe some of us were told were taboo, or some of us were raised, oh, don't talk about that. I've never shied away from those conversations. I remember, and I've always had those conversations with my students, and I've always had those conversations with my colleagues. I remember probably one of my first experiences talking with students about race was in my first teaching job, where I was a Spanish teacher. And I used to dye my hair really blonde. And so I was like a white woman Spanish teacher with really, really blonde hair. And I remember one student said, are you white? And another student like shushed them, like, don't talk about that. That's taboo. Like, we don't talk about that. And I decided to create a space for, we can name my race, and we can have that conversation. And it's okay that it's not racist to talk about race. And so that was sort of my first foray into it. And, now it's an issue that affects me, as an educator, but also affects me personally. And so I felt like I needed to learn, and I needed to grow, and I needed to seek out spaces and create spaces where I could have those conversations. And so sometimes it's, when someone says something, it's saying, what do you mean by that? Can you explain to me what you mean by that? And sort of problematizing some of the things that we just say, or that someone may just say without understanding that it's hurtful. And it is always making sure that we're centering impact of actions, and of conversations, and of comments that may be off the cuff, but that can be really, really hurtful. For me, and with my grade level team, a big part of addressing racism, in the third grade standards, we're supposed to teach the history of Massachusetts. And we can't just start with the Mayflower. We really have to acknowledge and recognize that we live on the land of the Pecumtuck and the Nipmuc people. And we have to make sure that we're including Indigenous history, and that we're centering Indigenous perspectives as we're talking and teaching students about the settlement of this area. And teaching our students that yes, we are in Massachusetts, but yes, there were enslaved people in Massachusetts when it was founded. So that's just one specific example of how I bring it into the classroom with my students. But also that means conversations with colleagues, and that means looking really critically, as a team of educators at our data. We say, yes, we have an equity focus, but what does that look like in our classrooms? And how do we make sure that we're not perpetuating or reinforcing a white supremacy culture in our classrooms as we're teaching our students? I think that may be the most, one of the most important tasks that we have as we consider our pedagogy. And especially as we seek to be inclusive, and as we have such a beautifully diverse community with so many different kinds of people, and so many languages, and so many backgrounds, and so many different stories of people joining our learning community, that we always have to be considering how we need to be intentional about including everyone, and how we need to really respond when something happens that harms a group of people. Oh, you're still muted.
Thank you. So question number 9 says, please speak to the importance of art, music, physical ed, tech, and library instruction in our students' education and in our school community.
I really appreciate this question. I think, the special classes for some of our students, those are really their opportunities to get really excited. And that can be an entry point for students. If a student is really, really interested in art, and that's a strength that they have, and that's an area that we can get that student really motivated and put that student and give every single student opportunity for success. The same goes for PE, the same goes for technology, the same goes for music. I think each of those spaces is a vitally important aspect of a well-rounded education that we offer our students. And our special teachers are such an important part of our teams as educators, because we each see our students within our own context. And so being able to talk with the physical education teacher and hear about a whole different skill set that a student may have that maybe I wasn't aware of as a classroom teacher is something that just makes me think even more about how all of our roles are so important and all of our roles are so connected. I also think it's really important that we make sure that we're all collaborating, that we connect the themes and our goals of educating all of our students throughout all of the content areas. And so I think that that's part of why it's so important to have such a great team that's talking to each other, and that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, because we can make curriculum connections that will help students access content in a way that they hadn't accessed it before. I think I can't really speak. I couldn't say enough about how important I think it is to make sure that we protect students' access to the arts, to the connections between the arts and science and technology, and then we also are making sure that we're giving our students lots of different forums to be successful, and then we're talking about those successes so that we can celebrate them as a whole community. So and when I taught Spanish, I was like a specials teacher. I was a rotating teacher, and that really gave me a really profound respect for teachers that teach lots and lots of kids, and teachers who work with the whole school, because the view that they have of all of the students is amazing, but also that we need to be really careful that we're protecting the specials teachers' time, because the curriculum that they're juggling and the instruction that they're juggling for the whole entire school is a really, really different, it's a different kind of load than a teacher who's working with, one group of students or maybe two groups of students.
Okay. Question number 10 out of 14. This one should also seem familiar to you. It talks about the 3 district-wide programs at Fort River: Caminantes, the dual language program; AIMS, the specialized program for students who have high-functioning autism spectrum disorder; Building Blocks, a specialized therapeutic program for students with emotional disabilities who need specific social, emotional, and behavioral supports, right? So those are the 3 programs that Fort River houses. And it says, can you please discuss your experience with each of these populations and your experience working with specialized program students?
Yeah, I would love to share about that. I think, my first experience working with students in a specialized program was at Fort River. when I had the opportunity to work in a classroom that had students from the programs, and then also to sub within the programs. And it gave me a real appreciation for all of the work and all of the planning that goes into making sure that kids have a school day that works for them, and making sure that kids have access to their peers, making sure that they have access to the curriculum and that they're able to learn. So I just have such great appreciation for all of the work that happens in programs like AIMS and Building Blocks. In the school that I teach at now, formerly had equivalent programs to both of those, and they were the model was shifted, and so the programs went away, and I really missed that additional support and the proactive planning and the ability to modify a student's day so that they could be successful as much as possible. I really missed that, and I missed the collaboration and the co-teaching opportunities that I had with the teachers in the program and the staff in the programs. My goal as a person who really deeply believes in inclusion is that we're supporting students in learning alongside their peers in the gen ed classroom as much as possible. So that's really, that's the goal that I come at it with. And I think that the support that's provided to students that need, some modifications to their day or modifications to the content that they're learning, the work that the programs do is so important. So, and then to address the dual language program, which was not at Fort River when I was there, but when I heard that had been added at Fort River, I was so excited. I think it's so important that we cultivate biliteracy as a bilingual person, and I have a daughter that is in a dual language program where I live. I think it's so important that we make sure that we're supporting kids in for the students whose Spanish is their first language, making sure that we're supporting first language literacy, which I think is one of the really beautiful things that dual language programs do. And then also helping students acquire a second language in a program that really values both languages, and is just really important. I do think that I think we need to be really intentional when we have 3 different programs in the school to make sure that we are working to keep our school community unified, and that we're working to make sure that we are we're taking I was reading something that quoted bell hooks and saying we need to take like a both and approach. And so the programs aren't like an either or thing. They're part of the school, and it's one school. And so I think it's really important that we keep that in mind as we're talking about the programs and as we're talking about how to move forward. So I think that each of the programs that is at Fort River serves to enrich the whole community, and that the programs allow kids and families and cultures to be included in the whole school in ways that would be a lot more challenging without the programs.
Thank you.
I can add more. I can say more. One thing that I, just thinking about how I support students who have, big behaviors or might need, de-escalation. I've always taught lots of different kinds of students. And so I made sure this year to complete my CPI certification. I felt like that would be important to have the de-escalation training, to make sure that I know how to follow those protocols, to make sure that I know, where the lines are in terms of keeping students safe. And so that was another step that I am always trying to add add new things and build my skills. And that was a way that I felt like I needed to continue to build my skills as I'm preparing for more of a school-wide role. That I need to be able to be one of the people who can respond when a situation is maybe escalating.
Okay. So Caminantes, once again, is the dual language program at Fort River. How will you support the mission, staff, families, and curriculum of this program and serve as an ambassador to the larger community? And that question should be familiar to you too.
Yeah. So one of the things that made me feel really excited about this opportunity was seeing that the Caminantes program had been started at Fort River. So, como persona bilingüe, yo sé que es muy importante practicar, mantener el idioma. So, like, as a bilingual person, it's really important to maintain and practice the language, and if you don't practice it, it goes away or becomes more difficult. But I think just like on a basic level, having the Caminantes program and saying we have a dual language program in our school creates automatically a space where families that speak Spanish are affirmed. They see their language in the school and in not just in informal spaces, but really in formal learning spaces as well. With that being said, I do think that it's really important that we make sure that we continue to honor and include and affirm all of the other languages that are spoken in such a diverse community as Fort River. That's sort of an aside, but I think that it's something that's important to continue to think about. I think that there are so many advantages of dual language, of being bilingual, of helping our students develop the seal of biliteracy throughout their school career. The ways that it has helped me being bilingual, the ways that it has helped me travel and learn and be parts of communities with people who are different from me and communicate directly in my professional life, being able to communicate directly with families and really understand where they were coming from has been really important. So I feel like I just kind of like who I am is an ambassador for a dual language program, just because I believe and I have lived and I have seen how important it is and just how enriching to my life it has been to be bilingual, and the fact that kids get to start in kindergarten learning a second language is just such an exciting and an amazing opportunity for our community and for our school. There are, specific needs in terms of, training and curriculum that a dual language program staff need, different needs that they have. And so I think that is important to keep in the forefront. If we want to maintain the program, we want the program to grow, we have to make sure that we're supporting the students, and we have to make sure that we're supporting the educators. And so I think just keeping an awareness of what those particular special considerations are for the dual language program, but always holding on to that both and approach, that it's not an either or. We're all the same school. We need to make sure that everybody's needs in terms of materials and trainings are met, and that we need to all make sure that we're building our capacity to meet the needs of all of our students. Is really something to hold on to all the time. I also think that the dual language program is a really exciting model for our instruction for language learners because of the way that it allows kids to continue to develop and grow literacy in their first language. And so that is an exciting model to be able to offer in our school. to students as they are acquiring English to learn if they're school teachers. That's important.
Okay. Do you need to pause here for a moment?
Water.
Okay, so you have about 3 more questions left. And
I have more things. I'm sure that I have more things that I can talk about when we finish the questions, if nobody in the chat has questions.
we'll get to that. So it says, what thoughts or ideas do you have for bringing a sense of joy, compassion, love, and unity into Fort River Elementary School at the student level, the staff level, and for the whole school?
Love, joy, unity,
and compassion.
And compassion. Love all of those words. I think the biggest way that we foster our love and our joy is through the compassion that we show each other, and through the community that we foster and that we develop in our school. I think it's really important that we create spaces for talking about, we in this case being educators, creating spaces where we talk about why we love this work. Why are we passionate about this work? Holding on to the things that bring us joy in our school and in our calling as educators, because I think for a lot of us it is really a calling. It's really a passion. It's something that we think about all the time, and we came into this field because we wanted to make a difference for students, and because we wanted to be change agents, and because we wanted to create learning spaces that, feeling like we had something to add. And I know that that's part of why I wanted to become a teacher. I felt like I had something to bring to the table. And so I think making sure that when we're together, that we're remembering that we chose this career out of love, and we need to make sure that we're really creating joyful spaces of learning for our students. And so that means that the instruction that we provide our students needs to invoke those same feelings in our students. But I also think it's really important that we care for each other, and that we take care of people's well-being, and that we build relationships. For me, leadership is so relational, and teaching is so relational, that we have to know each person the same way a teacher has to know each member of their class, and what do they like, and what do they not like, and what do they care about, and what makes their eyes light up. We need to do the same thing with the adult community as well. So I did some training and some work with Chip Wood, who's a responsive classroom founder, and who we used a program called Leading Together from the Centers for Courage and Renewal, which is based on research about relational trust in schools. And it's very much about, like, how do we build that supportive adult community, because we build the communities for the kids, and think really hard about, what are our hopes and dreams for our learning communities with our students. And I think that we need to have those same conversations with the adults, with the educators. What are our hopes and dreams? What's our vision? With families, what are your hopes and dreams for the school? What will tell you that your student is successful? And I think that those conversations that we have about our values, and those opportunities that we have to hear each other and understand each other, and understand what each person really is wanting, and hold that as the most important thing for that person, that is how we build trust, and that is how we continue to cultivate the learning community that's joyful and that includes and encompasses all of its different stakeholders.
Okay. So you mentioned a statement where you talked about choosing the career out of love, right? And so the next question basically asks you, how would you support Fort River staff to demonstrate their expertise?
Oh, I love this because I know in the time that I was at Fort River and just the amazing expertise and professionalism of the educators that work there. And so the specific ways, I think I mentioned some things earlier that are ways that I see to allow educators to share their expertise, which is that, you know, we're in a cycle of continuous improvement, right? So we know that each of us, if we have a growth mindset, we know that each of us can always try our best and then improve even more. And so I think that the model of collaborating around those improvement goals is the way that we can hear from each person about what their vision is, and then support each person in continuing to develop. And I think that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think it's necessarily my role to come in and say to everyone, like, you have to teach this way. I think it's my role to foster professional conversations and collaboration, and then support knowing each person as an individual and knowing their hopes and dreams and strengths, collaborating to make sure that each person has the opportunity to shine and also has the opportunity to grow the areas where they have identified that they want to develop. I think we have to have opportunities to celebrate each other. We have to have opportunities to celebrate our students. We have to find ways, you know, right now it's hard to come together as a whole school, but I think we have to find ways to have those, bringing the whole school together, even if it's a virtual assembly, if we can't get all 300 plus students and the educators in the same room, but making sure that we're sharing and recognizing all of the awesome things that people are doing. And then something that I have learned from my mentors is practices of individual and private recognition and gratitude, which is thanking and recognizing people, even if it's just writing someone a card that says, you know, your teaching practice as I walked through and saw you explaining something to your students was really beautiful. And so I think it's that, you know, like big recognition, and then small and tiny recognition. The other thing that I'm really interested in is finding ways to, I think one of the ways that we can grow as educators is to be a part of educational research. And so whether that's partnering with UMass to make sure that we're having the opportunity to really study what we're doing, or guiding our own action research processes, that those are ways that we can learn from each other and learn from ourselves and learn from our students and families, so that we can make sure that we're always improving. But I just get so excited sitting in a room and talking with educators about practice and hearing from people about what are they thinking about, what are they working on, what are the steps that they're taking to address the things that they're wondering about, and how much we learn from each other in that context is really, really exciting for me.
Okay. So we started about an hour ago, and before I ask the last question or make the last statement, but we started an hour ago and we didn't have this many people on the call at that time. Okay. So if you don't mind going back to that first point and just telling the people who are on now about yourself and why you are the best person for this role as the next leader of Fort River Elementary, please.
Thank you. I should have written a speech so I could read it verbatim. I always, if I write a speech, I always feel like a little bit.
Right, and I know they can always go back and watch this video over again to hear it, but just because we have enough time, if you don't mind going back and stating.
Yeah, I'd love that. So I will just reiterate again what I said at the beginning, how happy and excited I am to have had the opportunity to sit before all of you today. Estoy tan emocionada y tan agradecida de tener la oportunidad de venir, de estar aquí con ustedes. I wish I could see the faces of the people who are here, and I hope that I will have the opportunity to see your faces at some point in the future. I see this process as I'm looking for the right match for me, and you are looking for the right match for you. And I really believe that my educational philosophy and my collaborative and open leadership style and my deep connection to this area will make me a really good match for Fort River. I have loved the Fort River community since I interned with Mrs. Griswold in 3rd grade when I was doing my master's, and I spent some time that same year working as a substitute throughout the building, and then I finished the year as a long-term sub teaching Spanish and ESL. And I always felt like, this was like Fort River was a learning community where I would really love to come back and have, be for a long time because it's just, it's that kind of awesome place. So my sort of resume details are that for the past 8 years, I have been teaching either 3rd or 4th grade at Jackson Street Elementary School in Northampton, working with a very diverse group of students and caregivers, serving in formal and informal leadership roles, such as a grade level literacy coach. I was the union president. I've been on lots of committees, and I also have really enjoyed mentoring younger teachers, newer teachers as they've come into our building, and pre-service teachers from the local universities. I shared a quote I shared a quote that I read, which was, justice is what love looks like in public. And that really stood out to me as I was thinking about the Fort River motto of "We choose love," because I was thinking about, how are the ways that I choose love in my practice as an educator? And I feel like I choose love by standing up for educational justice and equity for students, families, and educators. Because I know that within a inclusive and supportive and affirming school community, each of us can achieve. And I really believe that goes for students and educators and families. I really believe in taking a strength-based approach to each member of our community. Before the time I spent at Fort River and before my time at Jackson Street, I was a Spanish teacher for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students in Holyoke. And before that, I worked in the legal field. And so I feel like all of the different experiences that I've had allow me to kind of move from like a small level to a big systems level to respond to all of the different pieces that go into a school running smoothly, but also being a really joyful, safe, and supporting environment for everyone involved.
Okay, thank you. And so the last question, I should have said we had 15 questions just by going, but the last question says, what is something you have done that you are especially proud of, and it does not have to be work related?
Not work related.
It does not have to be work related.
I mean, On a personal level, I'm really proud of my daughter and the person that she is becoming in this world, where she has such an understanding of all different kinds of people, and an understanding of gender, and an understanding of race, and an understanding of like what it means to include and care for people. That is it's just really beautiful, and I feel so hopeful about the generation of kids that's being raised now, because, and I tell my students all the time, you know, you're gonna grow up and you're gonna change the world. And so we're helping them as educators, we're helping them kind of envision the world that we hope that they will have. My daughter's 6, so she has a long way to go. She's gonna turn 7 in June. And then professionally, I'm really proud of the way that I've created spaces with my students where they stand up for each other, and where they have hard conversations with me, and where they're brave, and that is something that I'm really, really proud of. And I think that's the community that we have built together. And so when I think about making a change from leading a smaller group of people to leading a larger group of people, that's the kind of space that I want us to have together, is a space where each person can be who they are, and can express their truth, and feel safe and feel affirmed, and that others will stick up for them, and their peers will stick up for them, and I will stick up for them. And that's sort of my hope and my vision for education, you know, that we have to create, like, there's a future that we want, and we have to start constructing that future now, through the way that we live, and through the way that we work together, and the way that we care for each other in our schools. And so that means, you know, maybe transforming some structures that haven't lent themselves to that. But it's also, to me, really something that's really exciting and promising. And so that's kind of the thing that I feel proud of personally and professionally, but it's also the thing that I think I will bring to Fort River is how do we continue to develop as a community that's oriented towards inclusion and educational justice. That seems to me to be the way that we have to move forward.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like the Fort River community to know about you?
I mean, first and foremost, I really hope that we're gonna all have the opportunity to work together and get to know each other, and support each other. You know, we're living through a challenging time, but I also think that these challenges are sort of an opportunity to slow down, and make sure that we're caring for each other, and caring for our students and for our kids. And so I hope that this conversation is a beginning, and that, again, that I'll have a conversation where I can see everybody's faces. Although it's been lovely speaking with you, Doreen. This 10 p.m. I'm excited to see, the whole community. So one thing, I just see myself as a person who's always learning and always growing. I started thinking about this transition from a teaching role to a broader school-wide leadership role. I've been thinking about it for a couple years, and I really started thinking about it when my principal, when Agna, retired, because I saw the impact that she had on all of us and the way that she cared for everyone. And so I, learned a lot from her about how to be and how to lead and how to listen to people and how to care for people. But I also felt like it was really important to do my own learning and kind of build my own network beyond that. So I started a CAGS program in educational leadership, which, that's sort of like jargon. It's like a grad program for people who already have a master's, but I felt like it wasn't quite the right fit. And so I'm going to transition to a doctoral program this year. And I really hope that will be an opportunity for me to continue to grow as a researcher and continue to learn, and will be sort of a reflective space for me as I leave the school, or facilitate the conversations and facilitate the processes that will happen within the school. And so I just hope that the way that I have sought my own learning and my own professional growth will kind of show everyone that I see myself as unfinished, and that I see myself as learning from all of the amazing educators and students and caregivers that I have the opportunity to collaborate with every day. And so I really hope that sort of cultivating that love of learning and the way that we show our students that we're always learning and growing, that's an important part of bringing a growth mindset to our work and bringing sort of a culture of continuous improvement to our work.
Okay, well, thank you. It sounded like you said, Doreen, I've seen you too much, and now I want to see the rest of the community.
No, I've been so happy. I've been so happy to see you, and I have really appreciated the ways that this process has been so thoughtful. And it made me think a lot about, the communication aspect that we spoke about earlier, like how much that diffuses any feelings of concern or worry, to just sort of know like what's going to happen at each step. And that's, I think, what we try to do, within the school as well. Like, here's what to expect at each step. And so I've really appreciated that. And it's been lovely getting to see you so many times. I am excited to be able to see everyone else, and hopefully I will have the opportunity to do that soon, because I'm looking forward to that.
Well, thank you for joining us, the community, and everyone here in Amherst Schools, to just talk about you and your experiences and what would make you the next best leader here in our Ford River Elementary School. So I do want to thank you for that, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Do we hang out until 6:30 in case somebody comes on with a question?
I think they've had a lot of opportunity. We've been on for an hour and 17 minutes, so they've had a lot of opportunity to put things in the chat. Okay. But maybe, the questions that were asked, they were probably saying, oh, you know what, those are some good questions too. So let's just say goodbye, and I'll talk to you again. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone out there. Bye.
Bye-bye.